From our digital broadcast center in New England, this is Your World Discovered. My name is David Ewen from E.P.N, and my guest today is Sue Brannan Walker, who is a Professor Emerita at the University of South Alabama and publisher and editor of Negative Capability. She was Poet Laureate of Alabama from 2003 to 2012 and has published 10 books plus hundreds of poems and articles on Southern subjects and authors. A new book is forthcoming from Clemson University Press in 2017. Her book, The Ecological of James Dickey, is the recipient of the Adele Mellen Prize for its distinguished contribution to scholarship. The first thing we'll do is we'll welcome Dr. Walker to the program.
Hello, David. Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Now, before we went on air, you were telling me there was also another book that you have coming out in 2017. Is that correct?
That is correct, that I heard about just since we were talking. It's a book called It's Good Weather for Fudge, Conversing with Carson McCullers. And I have been invited to read from that book in Rome in July, and it's going to be published by New South Press in Alabama.
Well, that's very exciting. So you've got some nice travel plans coming up in the year 2017. Let's get an understanding for our audience who have not met you yet. Tell us a little bit about your academic background and how you got into the style and genre of the writing that you do.
Well, I'm a graduate of Tulane University. I got a M.Ed there, an M.A. there, a Ph.D. there, and finally they said, well, you need to get out of here. And so I came to the University of South Alabama and got a job, and I taught for 35 years.
And when you've been teaching for 35 years, what is it that your students got from your lectures?
I hope that they got inspiration. I hope that they fell in love with language. And I hope that for the rest of their lives, as I have for all of mine, have learned that writing and talking and thinking opens the world. It helps us discover the world.
Now, you had mentioned that you hope that your students received inspiration and fell in love with the language. Obviously, that is something that happened with you. What would you say planted the seed for that?
For them or for me? For them?
Well, for you. What planted the seed for that for you? How did you get the bug?
I always loved the sound of language. And my first experience, I think, was when I had my tonsils out at age 5. And I loved Robert Louis Stevenson's A Child's Garden of Verses. And I had my mother read it to me over and over and over again. I have a little shadow, what was it? It goes in and out with me. And what can be the use of it is more than I can see. And I just loved it. And I've loved language and sound and music. I played the piano for 12 years. So I think music and poetry have a kinship together.
Well, that is, now you had mentioned you play piano. Did I understand that correct?
I played the piano for 12 years, and I played the clarinet in the band. And actually, I played in the band with Fannie Flagg.
Oh my. So you're quite an accomplished musician, or am I being too bold by saying that?
Not really accomplished, but it provides joy.
Very good, very good. Now, you were talking before, and I wanted to key in on it. You were talking about the inspiration and the love of language. And you also mentioned in the summer of 2017, so that's about a year from now at the time of this broadcast, you're going to be doing a reading in Rome. You did a lot of lecturing. And also, we talked about your book that you have coming out, well, 2 books coming out in 2017. So in the area of language, there's writing, there's reading, and there's speaking. And you also talked a little bit about the integration with music. But I want to key on writing, reading, and speaking. What was it so many years ago that you got interested in? What made you say, I'm going to start with my study of language with this?
I read a lot, and I think that's an important thing. I was an only child for many, many years until I found my birth family. I was an adopted child, and so my companions were books. And I would play with my dolls, and they would act out things, and they were a family. So I always loved it. And I have written a one-woman, one-act play. So I've done drama as well, performed it too.
Let's learn a little bit about, we've learned a little bit about you. We learned that you played the clarinet and the piano. Now tell us a little bit about your drama experience.
Well, naturally, if you're writing, you write poetry, you write prose, you write fiction. Why not drama? So yes, so I got into writing one-woman, one-act plays, which was a lot of fun. I did act in them and decided I didn't like that at all. So it was too much anxiety. So I would worry at night about every little thing that I did wrong. And then I was awake all night, and then the next day it would start again. So I think the page is better than the stage for me.
I never thought of it. That rhymes. The page is better than the stage. You had a little bit of anxiety on the stage. What was it about the page, the written word on a page, what gave it less anxiety or no anxiety at all compared to what it was on the stage? What was it that concerned you about the drama and the acting and working on a stage?
Well, on a page you can erase. On the stage, you're right there before everybody, and if you forget something, or the director says, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up, it's dragging, and then you would hear that all night long, so before we started again. So, but the page is friendlier.
So you had talked about when you were very young, and here's the reason why I'm talking about the drama, even though it was not something you wanted to pursue, is you mentioned that when you were a little girl, you played with dolls, you started to write out these dramas, these one-act plays. Was it the situation that occurred with the stage that said, the page is better? Was that something that pushed you towards the written word?
I started writing poetry, I think, when I was in the first grade. And I would write it as a means of apology. And if I misbehaved in some way, then I could write a little ditty that would say something like, roses are red and violets are blue, and I'm sorry I upset you. And so I could get by with a lot of stuff doing that. And again, it was the rhyme, and I liked the sound of it.
And since you like the sound of it, let's go to another part of language, which is the speaking. You mentioned a moment ago that you're going to be doing a reading in about a year's time in Rome. Tell us a little bit about in what way you like language in terms of speaking it. What do you like to hear? You keep talking about you like the sound of it.
I think that for a writer, that a writer needs to read their work so they can hear themselves out loud. Some writers have trouble speaking out loud. One of the first things my father told me when I was in college was to take a course in public speaking. So I did, and then I followed that up with another course called oral interpretation. And I remember that very well because we had to get up and give impromptu speeches, and my knees actually knocked together. And I thought, if I can't sit down, I'm going to fall down any minute now. So I think that's very important for a poet to be able to recite their own work because it's part of conveying meaning. So the meaning comes through the way that the words are juxtaposed on the page, and then they're oral. They come aloud again, and they speak and convey that meaning. The humor, the sadness, emotions that come into the sound of language that is even missing on the written page so much. So the voice is important.
Tell us a little bit about what you have recommended to other writers. We've talked a little bit about the writing, the reading, and the speaking. That's what I was investigating before in my conversation with you. Tell us, what is it that you tell writers to say, this is what you need to do?
I think it's like playing the piano, and you start practicing with the scales. You don't just sit down and play a piece. You work at it and you work at it. And I think poetry is like that, and I think reading is like that as well. So you need to learn to express that poetry. And I think I had mentioned that I was an adopted child, and I had always wondered about my origins. And one of the very first poems that I ever wrote was about, serious poems, was about that said, "Where are you, woman? You who gave birth to me 30-odd years ago today, casting out 9 months of me with a heave and a shove. Do you remember? Because it was your delivery day. Did you ever hold that kid of yours, hold me in your arms? Or was it an instant separation, as quick as a snip of cord that severed us two? And now do you ever wonder if my eyes are like yours? Lapis blue. You have 3 grandsons, 2 are twins, but I call another mother. Someday I will come, traveling my shadow to your door, collecting for the heart fund, I will tell you, take your dollar and walk away."
And I give you a round of applause. I love that. The question I have for you is as I was observing that, I noticed the voice, I noticed the facial expression, which was obviously showing the emotion. So your focus and study on poetry is more than just this pen and a piece of paper. It's a lot more, isn't it?
I think it is. I think it's the totality of being in the world.
Can you elaborate of what you mean by the totality of being in the world? What does that mean to you?
Well, actually, I'm borrowing from Heidegger, who talks about being, and I think that we, through our writing and through our worldly experiences, we come to understand who we are in relation to other people. And I think that in this time we live in, and my journal is called Negative Capability, and it comes from Keats. And he said, "I know what quality goes to form a man of achievement, especially in literature, and which Shakespeare possessed so enormously. I mean, negative capability, the capacity to be in doubt without irritable reaching after fact and reason." And so I think that being is associated with our experiences in the world and with our discoveries about ourselves, which I love your word discovered too.
The being that you talk about, which has evolved, it makes sense more of what you are talking about. You had mentioned before that writing and evolving into the art and craft of writing that we're talking about today is like playing the piano. Would you say that the practicing is very much like being very persistent and never giving up and persevering?
I think it is perseverance. Yevgeny Yevtushenko said, "Belief in yourself is indispensable." And I think that it's very hard for us to believe in ourselves, to accept our accomplishments. I think we accept failure much more easily than we can accept our successes in a way.
And so what was it that made you say to yourself when you started down this path so many years ago, "I'm not going to give up"? What was it? part of it was what you had mentioned before. You had a love for the language, but there must have been something that had to bring you to where you are today.
In the beginning, I think it was the experience of being an adopted child and being given away at birth. And so when I think from what I can understand of my past, that a couple came and got me and took me at birth. And so I was with them for a period of time. And then someone reported, as people do, that they knew this couple was not my parents and they had no right to me. And so my birth mother was called into court and admitted that indeed she had given birth to me. And so a very wise and wonderful judge said, I'm going to take this child and I'm going to put her in a foster home. And my parents adopted me from there, and I had the most wonderful parents I think that anyone could have ever had. And if I'd gone out and searched the world to pick them out, I would have picked them out.
You had mentioned a few times about the experience of being adopted, and fortunately it was a good experience, certainly through the foster home environment. Do you believe that that experience, and I ask this because you mentioned it a couple of times and also at the beginning of our conversation, that formed not only who you are, but your writing today? We're talking about your craft of writing in the area of poetry.
I think very much it did. I think it was Joyce Carol Oates who said, no, it was Marge Piercy, who said that we go back to our childhood again and again. And I think that we tend to do that. Go back to who we were as little children, maybe. Do you think so?
Well, I know I do. Let me first share with our audience once again. My guest today is Sue Brannan Walker, who is a Professor Emerita at the University of South Alabama and publisher and editor of her journal, Negative Capability. She was Poet Laureate of Alabama from 2003 to 2012 and has published 10 books plus hundreds of poems and articles on Southern subjects and authors. A new book is forthcoming from the Clemson University Press in 2017. Her book, The Ecological Poetics of James Dickey, is the recipient of the Adele Mellen Prize for its distinguished contribution in scholarship. I would like to talk a little bit about that book. Tell us a little bit about that book.
Well, I very much consider myself an ecologist, and I suppose I consider myself a deep ecologist, which means that you come to determinations again about self through nature, through being in the world. And so I very much like ecology, and I am on the board of the Mobile-Tensaw Delta, Blakely State Park, and I love to go over there and walk along the E.O. Wilson boardwalk and feel very much at home in nature. E.O. Wilson, by the way, has a book called Half Earth that is very new, and I've just been writing through E.O. Wilson and writing a response to each chapter, which has been an enlightening experience.
How has your writing changed over the years? And how much has writing become even more part of you as time has gone on?
Well, I write every day, usually in the mornings or in the middle of the night. And again, I think that's like playing the piano. If you don't keep it up, you kind of lose that connection that through writing. And so I think that we change as people, as human beings, really on a daily basis in terms of who we're with and being scared to death on being TV. So I think that all of our experiences change us.
Now, you had mentioned before that writing is very much like a state of being. So what you're doing as you continue to write is you're polishing that state of being. Can you tell us a little bit about what that experience is like as you write every day?
Well, what I'm trying to do for our website, which is Negative Capability Press Facebook and negativecapabilitypress.org, is to promote social media and touching lives of other people and other writers through Facebook, which a lot of people read. And so I try to write something every morning. So I'm doing matutinal musings on Facebook every morning, and was writing about dogs this morning. And I get up and I think, what in the world am I going to write about today? And I have a rescue dog named Flannery O'Connor. And so I started writing about the importance of rescuing animals.
Now, what made you come up with not only that idea, but ideas in general? How do you get inspired to say this is the right thing to write about?
I never know what's the right thing to write about. It's just like, what am I going to write about? And I had read online an article about dogs, dogs and behavior, and that dogs that are traumatized often carry that with them. And so I have a relatively, about 6 months now, a rescue dog who is a rat terrier, but a terror of a terrier. And she's learning to be socialized and not jumping up on people, but I'm aware of her fears as well. So I love animals, and so this morning I connected that article that I read with Flannery O'Connor, and we had published a book by a young woman in Tampa, Florida in 2010 who had died of a malignant brain tumor. And she had rescued a dog she called Chester. And the vet had told her that Chester would never be a good pet because Chester was too abused. And her mother had said that weeks and days before she died, her name was Alexis Saunders, that dog would not leave her bedside and stayed right with her. So that experience, and having published this book by this woman who died at the age of 34, and reading the article, and my own dog, who's sitting on the sofa, you can't see her, but is sitting on the sofa opposite me, listening. She's saying, how are you doing? You're doing okay.
Very good. Now, let's take a look at your website. You were talking about your website. It's negativecapability.org. And also the Facebook page, Negative Capability, as well. Did I have that website correct, negativecapability.org?
No, negativecapabilitypress.org.
Oh, let me stand corrected there. Negativecapabilitypress.org. I'll say that again, negativecapabilitypress.org. And how is it found on Facebook again?
Negative Capability Press Facebook.
Okay, Negative Capability Press Facebook. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the website, negativecapabilitypress.org. What would people expect to see on your website?
Well, they will see the books that we published, and we published over 100 books now. So they'll see the books that we have published. They will see interviews with poets. They will see blogs. So at the moment, I think that's mainly what's on it.
So people can explore a little bit about you. And speaking of exploration, from this point forward, aside from the trip to Rome next year, what changes, what evolution, what higher dimension in terms of your craft and your career, where do you expect that to lead over the next future?
Well, I'm always thinking about what is the next book going to be and what's the subject of the next book going to be. So I finished one and that's behind me. So then what is the next one?
What would you like it to be? What do you think it might be?
Well, I think that it's probably going to be another book similar to It's Good Weather for Fudge, but the topic will be Flannery O'Connor. So I've written a lot of critical articles on Flannery O'Connor, but I think that what I'm thinking about is a narrator who is a student, because I still meet with my students on a fairly regular basis. And this narrator is studying Flannery O'Connor. So she's writing about her experiences, about what it means to read A Good Man is Hard to Find, and some of Flannery O'Connor's other works. And I will do it as Erasure, or as a Sestina, or as a Villanelle, or some poetic form. It'll be very much a hybrid work.
So you're still doing some more in studying, exploring, and I like that sense of exploration. Do you consider yourself an explorer?
Yes, I do that on a daily basis. I explore recipes. I explore anthills. I explore walking down the sidewalk, what trees growing, whatever is out there. That the poet Jack Gilbert once said that he taught his students to observe 3 new things a day. And then they got over, the cliches of things, and you start really looking and discovering the world and what's out there, and it changes every day. The clouds in the sky, the patterns that they make, the sound of water, rain, whatever it is. And it's bright sunshine here today is quite wonderful. Hot, but wonderful.
Let me share with our audience, once again, my guest today is Sue Brannan Walker, who is Professor Emerita at the University of South Alabama and publisher and editor of Negative Capability. We spoke earlier that the website is negativecapabilitypress.org, and on Facebook, Negative Capability Press Facebook. And she was Poet Laureate of Alabama from 2003 to 2012 and has published 10 books plus hundreds of poems and articles on Southern subjects and authors. A new book is forthcoming that we talked about during the interview from Clemson University Press in 2017. Her book, The Ecological Poetics of James Dickey, is the recipient of the Adele Mellen Prize for its distinguished contribution to scholarship. And at this time, I just want to thank Dr. Walker. Thank you so much for joining me on Your World Discovered.
And thank you, David, and come down and eat some of our oysters, fried or stewed.
I like that. You've talked me into it. My name is David Ewen. Thank you. My name is David Ewen. This is Your World Discovered. This is E.P.N.